Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to start this series of inauguration lectures today on our campus. My name is Lisa Diedrich, as Håkan introduced, and I'm a professor of landscape architecture. A small discipline, a young one also, which has developed only recently from the profession of the same name. A profession that is deeply embedded in society, and a society living in an urbanizing world. Hence the title of my lecture, Impact Society, Design Research for Urban Landscapes. To structure my lecture, I want to extract 3 terms from this title: society, design, and landscapes. And then I want to slightly reshuffle and complement them. That's what designers do when they reframe problems. And I'm trained as such one. I studied architecture in France, urbanism in Germany, and landscape architecture in Denmark. And now I'm here in Sweden as a design researcher. Referring to landscapes, design and society, I aim to impact research for urban sustainability. And I see this as my contribution to SLU as an institution offering science and education for sustainable life. I'm performing this from 2 perspectives: as a professor of landscape architecture at the department of the same name, and as director of SLU Urban Futures, one of the future platforms of SLU. Both are hosted here at the LTV faculty and situated at Alnarp campus. Landscape is a difficult term. It harbors many different definitions, depending on who you ask. Alnarp campus is a landscape, or better, it embraces many landscapes. It even hosts laboratories for landscapes. For most people, landscape is green, like in this picture. When I'm lecturing in Spain or Australia, people laugh at me. Over there, landscape is most of the time brown or red. When I started working at SLU, I went to visit the landscape lab with its founder, Roland Gustafsson, now Professor Emeritus of Landscape Architecture, whose expertise covers both design and dendrology. It was November, and the lab was not green either. Roland explained to me that when he started at SLU back in the 1970s, he wanted to do research on urban woods as one form of landscape that he thought would matter for urban areas. But since he could not take a whole landscape into a laboratory, he took the laboratory into the landscape. And that's why this place is called Landscape Laboratory. By the beginning of the 1980s, Roland managed to talk the university leaders of the day into providing him with a couple of hectares of land on campus to turn it into an experimental urban wood. Together with other researchers, students, professionals, families from Luma and around, he would plant and maintain, test and reject, observe and refine species, growth, soils, water, technology, management, and also spatiality, colors and contrasts, textures and tactility, atmospheres, and beauty. He sought to understand the interaction of natural forces and human beings. And since the 1980s, he enacted a definition of landscape in the Landscape Lab, which only 20 years later, in 2000, would become manifest in the first international treaty to be exclusively concerned with all dimensions of landscape, the European Landscape Convention, ELC. And here's a little extract. It says, Landscape is part of the land, as perceived by local people or visitors, and which evolves over time, as a result of being acted upon by natural forces and human beings. This short quote rejects some of the main commonplaces. Landscape is not greenery. It is not romantic rural. It is not nature. At least it is not only those things. The ELC expresses that the term landscape includes aesthetics or aesthesis, perception in the old Greek meaning. It points at the open-ended dynamism of landscape, instead of seeing it as a static scenery. And it rejects the opposition between nature and culture. Further, it does not exclude the urban or distinguish it from the rural. At the outset of 21st century, processes of urbanization impact the whole planet. Leading urban researchers call our epoch the urban age, or subject to a planetary urbanism. Landscape researchers add a landscape perspective. For example, in the landscape lab, the urban wood that has grown here represents a new urban open space category, a pocket wood, as Anders Busse-Nielsen suggests, former student of Roland Gustafsson, today one of my fellow professors and a practitioner. Olnap's urban wood is not designed, planted, finished. Landscapes are never finished. They are continuously designed. And that's what we call here creative management. The Olnap Lab is one of the first of its kind. It relates to other such places internationally. Finding them, lending them visibility through a publication, adds a discourse to their physical existence. In a team, we realized a dossier in the design magazine Scape. And then we realized there was much more to say. So now we are working on a book, Woods Go Urban, 30 years of experience with landscape labs, out by the end of the year. Since the dossier publication, the Olnap Lab attracts international designers. Here a recent visit with guests from Germany, the US, and France. An internationally renowned designer also came, Michel Devigne. What exactly do designers find so interesting about this lab? Coming from an office based in Paris with a comprehensive portfolio and built projects all over the world, MDP practices design in a landscape laboratory way. This leads me to some considerations about design. Design in my field is more than decorative objects you would buy at Designtorget. In architecture, design is traditionally understood as creation ex nihilo, an activity that consists in inventing something new on a virgin site, defined by an author, shaping an entity of its own right, which is then a form or an œuvre. Like the Plan Voisin for Paris, a tabula rasa built on the historic center, allowing the author, in this case Corbusier, to create something completely new. I subscribe to a contrary understanding of design, which is design as transformation. It involves a change from one state to another. It oscillates between finding out what is there and testing what it could become. The existent drives the design. Many actors are part of the design. It is not form as an object, but transformation as a process. And MDP's work illustrates exactly this idea. In the office's project for the riverbanks of Bordeaux, a green spine is gradually inserted into the existing urban fabric. Designing for MDP means to design the process, not the end product. That awarded the office a National Urbanism Prize in France as landscape architects. Designing the landscape charter of Bordeaux allowed MDP to synthesize issues that were seemingly singular but are in fact all interrelated, such as shaping an ecological structure for the city, regenerating its disused industrial areas, reconsidering the city's mobility system, retrofitting its historical center. And before creating single parks or large green structures, MDP always realizes prototypes. That is very similar to the Olnap Landscape Laboratory. MDP's park along the River Garonne, Parc aux Angéliques, was not designed and built all at once, just as the Landscape Lab here. It's an ongoing work in Bordeaux since 2012. And so it works. When industrial plot on the former harbor site is disaffected, the next part of the park is planted. Like in the Olnap Landscape Lab, planting and maintenance are experimental, and lessons learned are introduced into the ongoing park design. This park grows with the district in Bordeaux and adapts to the problems that arise. Urban futures are unpredictable these days, and both designers and design researchers have to engage with these uncertainties. Design research helps face uncertainty in analyzing and theorizing design practice. It takes designers seriously, but it also takes a critical distance to them. Design research gets published in scholarly literature. Landscape architectural design research is very young. The journal JOLA, which you see here in the middle, for example, has celebrated its 10th anniversary only in 2016. Design researchers only start shaping their own scholarly discourse, a field in which SLU could very well position itself through landscape architecture. Design research feeds into professional literature. This is where research finds its way into practice again. Practitioners conceive and build real-world landscapes for society. Last year's Kuhn evaluation here at this university has clearly pointed at the fact that SLU's landscape field, per its very nature, provides SLU with a major impact on society. Teaching design is also design research, in particular in times of rapid change and uncertain futures. Teachers today have to teach what they do not yet know. According to French semioticist Roland Barthes, this is research. I am training young landscape architects to develop thinking eyes, to use their rationality and their senses to bring together scientific methods with artistic ones. I deeply honor my predecessor, Professor Emeritus of Landscape Architecture Per Gustafsson, who introduced and anchored this approach at SLU. He is a real chevalier de la profession. When designing the future of Olnap campus, my students see it as an urban landscape. When they study the wider surroundings and understand Olnap, they see it not only as an isolated island, but as part of an archipelago, a regional university archipelago, or also an archipelago of local communities. They study Olnap's history and are impressed. It has been a model farm, and they question what it could mean to be a model farm today. Taking SLU's mission seriously Science and Education for Sustainable Life, they invite the university to practice what it preaches. Could Ornap campus be a model for urban sustainability today? Could the crown jewel, the landscape lab, inspire SLU to turn the whole campus into a lab campus? Maybe a living lab? Today, labs are not only secluded spaces with ceramic tiles, workbenches, and scientists in white coats, hermetically sealed off from everyday life. Today, society has entered the lab. And indeed, Ornap's Landscape Lab links to a new idea of the lab, known as Living Lab or Real World Lab on an international level. The European Network of Living Labs defines them as user-centered, open innovation ecosystems based on systematic user co-creation approach, integrating research and innovation processes in real-life communities and settings. This development reflects the massive societal changes of the second half of 20th century, when the following question got voiced ever more often. What is the place of people in knowledge? Living laboratories are one answer. They illustrate the emergence of a new form of knowledge production called Mode 2 by scholars in philosophy of science. These scholars observe the transforming relationship between science and society as a co-evolutionary change. If society changes, they claim, science has to change too. The transdisciplinary Mode 2 has to complement, according to them, the disciplinary Mode 1. So far, in the tradition of modernity, science has been conceived as the legitimate place where knowledge gets generated, separate from society. Research results are communicated to society. In late 20th century, the institutional structures of society got loosened. Traditional authorities lost legitimation, including the academy as the place where knowledge arose. Why not elsewhere? The boundaries between society and science became porous, and society started communicating back to science with the idea to take part in a knowledge production that would reflect their wishes and fears. Society impact is a key goal for research today in any discipline. There might be a condition to it. Allow society to impact science in the first place. Landscape, fit for the 21st century, need research, teaching, professional practice. They need knowledge production with porous boundaries between fields that are conventionally separated. They need transdisciplinary modes of advancing altogether in view of sustainable futures, which for most people are urban futures. SLU has a powerful base camp for new knowledge production modes in the landscape field and for urban landscapes. SLU Landscape, the first item I show here, embraces transdisciplinarity from the outset, being composed by units of different natures, all feeding into the landscape field and reaching out to actors in practice and academia. SLU Landscape has first been described by Tina Sauerab, former Dean of LTV and Professor Emerita of Landscape Architecture at my department. It then continued as a bottom-up initiative across Ornap and Ultuna campuses, fueled by the insight that more than one department, more than one field of knowledge, more than one area of expertise, more than only theory or practice are necessary to research and realize sustainable landscapes. One of the units within SLU Landscape is the research platform SLU Urban Futures, a top-down initiative. Its mission to foster transdisciplinary work modes and to raise new research questions from the midst of society made it a natural ally of SLU landscape, especially if landscape is understood as urban. As a professor of landscape architecture, I belong to both. As a design researcher, I raise knowledge and networks for both. And as a critical European, I wish to see SLU at the forefront of forward-looking academic practice for sustainable urban futures. Thank you.